Hello everybody, I'm Ryan from Fireside Yankees with my friend and co-host Aiden, and Sunday marked the end of the season. The regular season's over, and since the Yankees did not qualify for the postseason, it means the Yankees 2023 season's over as well. And here's the big thing. We were supposed to make the playoffs this year, and not only are we not going to win the World Series, we're not going to get beat for a World Series, we didn't even make the playoffs. We didn't really finish that close to a wild card spot. I know we were only the second team, in terms of like being out of the playoffs in the AL, like we were right behind the Mariners, but I mean, it was, what, 6 games? September was a wash. They had, like, that little run with Jason Dominguez where you're like, oh, could they get back in it? But things just never clicked, right? This team, they got off to a decent start in April, kind of had a bad month of May, especially when Judge went down. Judge comes back, they have a good month of June until Judge gets hurt again, and then the season just wasn't the same. I know people talk about, like, when the season ended for the Yankees, when was it officially over? I think it was over the second Judge went down, and, that is one of the big points of weakness for this team. That's not the only point of weakness for this team, but, we're going to have a lot of questions about what this roster is going to look like next year, a lot of questions about what they're going to do differently. Obviously, the third-party audit is supposed to come in and do some reevaluations. So there is a lot for us to get into with a post-mortem episode about a team that was supposed to win a World Series or supposed to compete for one and then didn't even make the playoffs. So, Aiden, tell me a little bit about your day and, what you feel like is what was the biggest reason or the first reason you want to start off with for why the Yankees had such a disappointing season.
Ryan, had an okay day. As you guys know, I'm a Jets fan, so it was a bit rough morning waking up after all that Taylor Swift drama, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, Yankees season is over. I didn't really catch much of the last game yesterday. I was driving around doing some errands. But I mean, yeah, you mentioned, it looks like we were right behind the Mariners in the wild card standings, and maybe we had a shot, but it was, by mid-July, we kind of knew we were out of it. And then once we didn't do anything at the deadline, that was really the kicker. And you just figured it was over. It just, ever since then, it just was like the season is a wash. There's no point in watching. You mentioned, they started, it feels like yesterday that, it was April 1st or whenever opening day was. And, we were all excited about Volpe coming up, shortstop of the future, all the Derek Jeter comparisons that may have been a little unfair. But yeah, it felt like just yesterday I was watching Judge hit that home run in opening day, and I was like, oh my God, we might win the World Series this year. But obviously, that's how overreactions go at the beginning of the season. But, that rough May, Judge goes down in June, and you're right, that's when the season ended, and that's the problem. They were too reliant on Aaron Judge for the offense this year. That's where everything starts this offseason. You got to take a look at the offense from the top down. You're not just, obviously there's the audit on the organization as a whole, the front office, Cashman, the coaching staff, but everything starts with the offense here. Ryan, I'll start to read off the metrics that we have in our notes. 25th in runs scored with 673 runs, 94 WRC plus as a team. That's 19th. That's not, I guess that's not awful, but one of the most staggering ones to me that really bothers me is the negative 15.1 BSR. Are they really that undisciplined of a base running team that, you can't have little stuff like that, bring you down as an offense, because how are you going to win games if you can't run the bases, right? You just go down the list, and the Yankees are just in the bottom half or the bottom 5 of these metrics. They're 28th in on-base percentage, 29th in batting average. But, I guess you could draw some of this up to batted ball luck, but yeah, that's where it starts, Ryan. This offense was putrid all season. You and I have gone over it a million times already, but I'm curious to see, what you got for me, what you think, really needs to happen.
Yeah, so the big thing for me is, the Yankees did not get production that they expected to get from some key veterans. The 3 guys I'm going to highlight are Stanton, LeMahieu, and Rizzo. And look, for various reasons, these guys didn't perform to the level that they should have. And I'm not going to be too hard on LeMahieu because he went from good to average, right? Like, and he's an older guy. Like, you kind of expect a guy going from his age 34 to his age 35 season to take a step back. That being said, it's not going to look great for, the duration of the contract. Now you have to project from a 101 WRC plus coming off of a year where he got worse and then goes into his age 36 season. That's going to be a weird contract, but Stanton was projected for a 132 WRC plus. You got an 89. He was projected for 2.3 F WAR. You got negative 0.8. LeMahieu 119 and 2.8 for his projections in WRC plus and F WAR. You got a 101 WRC plus and a 1.1 F WAR. Anthony Rizzo, a 131 projected WRC plus. You got a 100 out of him. The F WAR 2.7 and you only got a 0.9. When these are your three guys who are considered to be top 5 position players in the team, and then they either are net negatives or barely above average at best, that's not great. Like, that's not the outcomes you're looking for. This team relied on a lot of things that, necessarily wasn't supposed to go right for them, and they didn't go right for them. Obviously, you think of the big one, Josh Donaldson at third base. The left field situation wasn't great. It felt like they banked on a lot of things going right that didn't go right for them. Again, I'm not going to sit here and get upset at them for banking on Anthony Rizzo or on Giancarlo Stanton. But, when those guys fall short, the idea is that you've built a strong roster around these guys so that you can at least compete and get to the postseason. Look, if you won 89 games and got into October, would that be, the most successful season in franchise history? Obviously not, but it gives you a shot to win the World Series. That's why the 2021 team doesn't feel like this team, right? Like, that 2021 team was very flawed. They got knocked out in the first round in a wild card game, but they made it to the postseason, right? Like, they had an opportunity to win the World Series. This year's team didn't give them that shot. And that's kind of the big thing. You need to have internal progression from your veterans, right? Like, these guys need to get better in 2024, or they can't be here, right? Like, even if you have to eat some money to do so, you can't keep giving veterans who are struggling starting jobs. They just gave Josh Donaldson that third base job. Even when he got hurt and Oswald Peraza came up for a little bit, the second Donaldson was back, Peraza was no longer a factor on this team, right? You're stunting the growth of certain guys who have higher ceilings, who maybe present better, better futures or present, better current value even, and you're punting that away for veterans. Aaron Judge talked about, like, a higher sense of urgency and how guys, even if you're in New York, even if you're a major leaguer, like, you have to continue to make adjustments. And Aiden, it felt like all year, like, hey, certain guys just didn't make adjustments. Where was that sense of urgency? Where was that sense of, we're trying to win a World Series. We as a team have to be better. We as a team have to, make the adjustments necessary. Even in the offseason, it starts in the offseason, right? Like, you can't walk into the offseason with the same routine after you've had a bad second half or you got blanked in the postseason. You've got to ask yourself, like, hey, what's got to change? What do we got to improve? What can we do better? And it feels like the Yankees are very reactionary instead of actionary in that regard, right? They wait for something to go wrong and then they make the change, right? And I think that burns them. So, Aiden, like, what do you think? Who do you think are certain guys that need to step up next year? I know we talked about breakouts as well. So, I wanted to talk a little bit about both those things. And I wanted you to, I got things started with the guys who struggled. I wanted you to get the head up, or I guess the first pick at some guys that could be better next year.
Well, Ryan, just a little bit on what you touched on with Stanton, LeMahieu, Rizzo. Like, yeah, those guys need to step up. They need to play how they're expected to be for what they're paid for. And, I don't want to really delve deep into this conversation, but, the contracts these guys are on, it brings up a conversation about Cashman and the decisions he's making. I mean, you can even go to the Donaldson trade and why he was still getting reps at third base every day. He was starting, getting all those at-bats while Peraza was just sitting in AAA, rotting away. And then he comes up in August, he struggles a little bit, and then in September, he kind of found the bat. He showed some signs of power. He was hitting the ball well. But, I mean, that just brings up the conversation of, is Cashman really making the right choices? I mean, listen, this is not a knock on Willie Calhoun. This is not a knock on Jake Bowers. This is not a knock on Billy McKinney. But when a position is such a glaring hole for the entirety of the 2022 season, it hurts you in the playoffs. And during the offseason, the entire fan base, even the organization acknowledges that left field needs to be fixed. And you don't fix it, you sign Judge, you re-sign Judge, you sign Rodon, and then you got Hal Steinbrenner saying, we're not done yet. And then all you do is sign Willie Calhoun to, a minor league contract. You sign Rafael Ortega. You sign Franchi Cordero, and that's your solution for, the problem in left field, the problems in the outfield. I like that. This we should have seen it from the start. We should, knowing that's what was happening. Those were the solutions they came up with. We should have seen it from the start, but I digress. I don't want to get too mad about it. I know this is a post-mortem episode, but as far as guys, who I think, could have a good year next year, who can break out, Ryan, I know you were massive on them. Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez, they were excellent this year. They came up in, I believe, the end of April, maybe it was the beginning of May. They came up and they were kind of asked to do an impossible job. They had to make some spot starts in a rotation that should have been one of the best rotations in the league. That's all everybody was talking about this offseason. The Yankees may have assembled the greatest rotation of all time. Well, a lot of stuff happened between then and the end of April, and Johnny Brito and Randy Vasquez come up. They make some spot starts. They don't look great, but they do a job. And then, they moved to the bullpen, and they were absolutely fantastic. Out of the bullpen, the Yankees love their high ground ball guys, and Brito has a 44.0 ground ball percentage. He was great. His ERA and his FIP did not look great, but I think that may have been quite inflated by all the spot starts he made. Randy Vasquez looked great out of there too. He ends the season with a 2.87 ERA. Just another guy I like for breakout. The rookie of the year. Well, he's not even the rookie of the year. The biggest rookie of the Yankees year was Anthony Volpe, and in ways he had a great year, and in some ways he did not have a good year. I was on Twitter about this today. He was a fantastic defender all season. Not all season. He started off a little harsh, but then he found it. I'm not quite sure what his defensive runs saved are right now, but I think at one point it was at like 10 or 11. Don't quote me on that though. But he was great defensively, but it wasn't until June, I guess I would say, we really started to see what his bat could look like. And you talk about Austin Wells being his hitting coach, the Anthony Volpe's numbers, the post-chicken parm, and then that's really what we saw of him. But you get to August and he the numbers still weren't where you want them to be. But I think that's what happens sometimes. That's a rookie. He's 22 years old. You're asking a 22-year-old to play major league games. I'm really stumbling over my words here, but that's really what you can ask from him. He was not exactly near a league average bat, but there's some suggestions that he had bad batted ball luck. I think his exit velocity is where it needs to be, but I think he can really take that leap next year at the plate. And if he hovers around 105, 115 WRC plus, somewhere in that range, that's a successful season for him next year. That's what you want out of him next year. So, Ryan, those are my guys that I really think could break out next year. I wouldn't say they're locks, but I think, they're very, very likely. Ryan, I'm curious to hear, who you got as your breakouts. I know you're just constantly looking at this roster, looking to see who's going to make the impact next year. So what do you got for me?
Yeah, so, I think you made a couple really good points, especially about, some guys in the bullpen. Like, Vasquez and Brito, I think, showed a lot of flashes. Will either of them be, starters in the future? We'll see. I think the Yankees like what they've given them as multi-relief guys. But, kind of like how Michael King, started out as a starter, kind of failed, and then, refound it this year. It's totally possible Brito does that down the line. I think that the development of a sweeper, gives him a really good breaking ball to righties. So, wait and see there. I think Michael King is kind of an obvious breakout candidate. I didn't even throw him on our original notes, and I kind of thought about it now. I'm that's kind of a very not an obvious one, but I would say obvious. He kind of has that 2021 Nestor feel to him of it's okay, he had a really nice year doing a lot of different things for this pitching staff. Now, can he do it over the course of a full season? And I think he can probably be good for around 130, 140 innings because he tossed over 100 this year. If we look at how they used Schmidt last year, Schmidt was around 94, 95 when you count his minor league innings as well, and he went up to 159 this year. King does have an injury that he's coming off of, and Schmidt was injury prone too, but he didn't come off of an injury in 2022. So, I kind of anticipate that, the Yankees give that similar progression of like, all right, King, you finished 100-something innings this year. We can get you to 140 next year. Obviously, barring any health issues, barring anything going wrong. But King kind of feels like he can go out and be like a really good starter for this team. Another guy I think that's important for breaking out, you talked about Volpe, like defensively he was really good, offensively not great. If Anthony Volpe, is able to make that progression from like, all right, he is a glove first guy to, all right, he's maybe still a glove first guy. Like he was really good defensively this year. To be the offensive equivalent to what he was defensively, he'd have to be like a 130 WRC plus hitter. So I don't think that's happening. But can he be like a 105 to 110? Like if he gets to that 110 range in terms of WRC plus, we're talking about one of the best shortstops in baseball. He put up 14 defensive runs saved this year. In terms of outs above average, I think it was +2, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, he was +2. So, overall, like you're looking at a guy who can give you, upper echelon defensive value while also giving you, maybe a really good glove. And then another big thing, I need him to be more aggressive on the base paths. I don't know if that's a him issue. I don't know if that's a Yankees like strategy issue, but I think he should have he should not have finished with like under 35 steals this year. He should have ran a lot more. He was really effective when he ran. He's a good base runner. I trust him to make the right decisions. He's fast. This team is kind of slow. Not kind of. They're very slow. You talk about this with their BSR. Like they are not a good base running team. They have to get better in that regard. I've talked about this with Alex with like equating home runs to like passing in the NFL or the 3-point shot in the NBA, where it's like, you can't sit here and try to win games without doing that, right? Like you can't try to win in the NFL and win a championship if you don't have a good quarterback and can't pass the football. You can't try to win in the NBA if you can't shoot the three. In baseball, you can't win if you can't hit the home run. But that doesn't mean you hit home runs and you're bad at everything else, and that's fine, right? In the NFL, how many teams have good quarterbacks that just they can't get past the NFC Championship game, or can't get past the divisional round, or whatever it may be, or the AFC, whatever it may be? Like you kind of think of like the Buffalo Bills and Josh Allen, right? Like that team has not gotten to a Super Bowl, right? They're really good at passing, but they've kind of been at everything else, right? The Yankees have been really good at hitting home runs, and they're kind of meh at everything else. And this year they went from meh to very bad. They were, one of the worst teams at hitting for average. That meant they were one of the worst teams at getting on base. They were the slowest team in baseball according to sprint speed. Defensively, they were very good actually. So I'm not gonna knock their defense. They were pretty good there. But overall as an offense, they have to get more well-rounded. I think Anthony Volpe is a part of that. Could Oswald Peraza and or Everson Pereira, just one of those two, step up? If one of those two guys step up, I think that's obviously a big thing. I'm segueing a little bit into like rookies here, but the guy I think we're the biggest on is Austin Wells, right? Like if he looks like the Austin Wells we saw towards the end of the season, man, that's a really good player. Like that's instantly like one of the best catchers you've had really since Posada retired. Like the Yankees have been blessed with some good catching seasons. They've had a couple good years from Russell Martin. They got a couple good Brian McCann years. They got a couple of good Gary Sanchez years, but they haven't had, that consistent every single, like obviously last year also with Jose Trevino, but they haven't had the consistent year to year for like 5 years. Pencilman as the catcher doesn't give you any problems. Can Austin Wells be that for this team? And if he can be that, that's huge, because here's another thing they need to get better in. And I know this is a little bit of a boomer thing to say. They need to get a little more left-handed. Like, not just like they need to get left-handed because of the short porch, because they can't hit righties. They are one of the worst teams in baseball at hitting against righties. And, ultimately Wells plays a role in that. So, I think when you're looking at breakouts, a lot of it is just looking at younger guys and hoping that they get a little bit better, looking at veterans and saying, hey, can you just look a little bit more competent? Can you kind of find it a little bit? Fortunately, this team has enough veteran talent and rookies that you can conceivably see a world where they piece together a good team, but they've got to make additions. And obviously we have some free agents. I don't think there's anybody like crazy notable, but there are still interesting guys to talk about. So Aiden, you're building this team. You're looking at like, hey, okay, we're evaluating the free agent market. We're evaluating the trade market. But is there anybody on this list in particular that you're saying, hey, we got to bring this guy back, or hey, I'm really into, at least exploring a route to keep this guy on the team?
Ryan, before I dive into the free agents, I just wanted to talk about Austin Wells a little bit. I know we both love him. he is the obvious breakout candidate for both of us because we just have been pushing his narrative like crazy. But I'm just going to read you his stat line since September 17th. So that's, I want to say that's like about the last 2 weeks of the season. I don't really know how many games that is. That's 10 games. So it's really not a big stretch. That's 37 plate appearances, but I'm going to read this stat line anyway. He had a 206 WRC plus with a 1.129 OPS, a 778 slug, 351 OBP, 333 average. The guy had a nice stretch of games. He's shown he can hit in the big leagues. He hit 4 home runs, 4 doubles. That's surprising to me. But he's the obvious breakout candidate. I think he could really put together a good season next year. But if we go and we look at our pending free agents, I mean it's a list of guys. That's for sure. I mean, you look at Luis Severino, really a tough year for him. You know, he was battling through injuries. He just didn't look great either. You know, I just don't know that you can really bring him back on a 1-year prove-it deal and feel comfortable with that, with what he showed you throughout this year, unless it's a really cheap deal. But I think it might be a mutual parting. I'm not really sure though. You know, I'm not saying I'm in the know on the situation. You look at Frankie Montas. I've been pushing that narrative. I think he is absolutely a guy you bring back on a 1-year prove-it deal. The Yankees he's never been healthy as a Yankee. He came over in that trade last August, and he didn't look great from the get-go. And then we find out that he was dealing with a shoulder. I believe it was a shoulder injury the whole time. I don't really remember injuries too well. I think I always forget that while I'm doing episodes. But you know, I think he's absolutely worth a prove-it deal. I don't see why the Yankees wouldn't bring him back. I don't see a world where they don't bring him back because, you know, they gave him a couple rehab starts at the end of September. You're giving a couple rehab starts to a pending free agent. Why are you doing that? And then the second to last game of the season, you give him a couple. He throws 1.1 innings pitched. Like, I think it's just blatantly obvious that he's coming back. You go down to IKF. You know, last year I would have told you no. This year, I mean, I'm still saying no, but, you know, I like the guy a lot more now, and that's really just because he wasn't playing shortstop this year. But, you know, I don't see why the Yankees would bring him back. Wandy Peralta, I've gotten in some arguments about this. I don't see why you don't bring him back. I really don't see why you don't bring him back. He had, you know, he didn't have an amazing year, but the guy's a ground ball guy, and that's what the Yankees love out of the bullpen. He's an elite not elite left-handed pitcher, but he's elite at generating ground balls, and he's one of the best at generating soft contact and whiffs. He had a 57.4 ground ball percentage on the year. He was top 50 in relief pitcher ERA. I know that's a lot of pitchers, but I'll say it again, that ground ball percentage, 93rd percentile, 89th percentile in average exit velocity, 85th percentile in chase percentage, 75th percentile in whiff percentage. I don't see why this isn't a reliever you don't bring back. He had a 2.83 ERA. Lefty relievers are a commodity you don't come by every day, and he's a guy that you absolutely have to bring back. This is not someone you can just let go. Going next onto that list, you got Keenan Middleton. I thought he was great, and you know, the few games he had with the Yankees, I'm absolutely down for bringing him back. Then at the bottom of this list, you kind of got Zach McAllister, Luke Weaver. You know, they showed up at the end of the Yankees season. I think they were kind of just there as depth. I don't know if they come back. Maybe they get some spring training invites, but they're not really someone I'm thinking about over the offseason. So Ryan, go down this free agent list for me and, you know, just talk about who you want to bring back. I'm curious if you agree with me on Montas and Peralta. I'm really curious about your take on Severino too.
Yeah, so to start it off with, like, I'm just gonna like start with the guys that like I just don't have interest in bringing back. McAllister, sorry, it's just like I don't really like, unless it's a minor league deal. Like, it's not like he's a difference maker at all. IKF, I don't think you're bringing him back. I don't think it makes sense. He didn't really improve from last year. I know that, like, it's a better story. He did some really nice things in terms of, like, you know, making changes in terms of what positions he played, but he's not a player that I think you're going to miss very much in terms of production. Montas, I love the idea of bringing Montas back on a 1-year deal. I think it's a good flyer. Obviously, it depends on the price tag. I don't think you're going to get a blow your socks off offer from anybody. And it's clear that he never really got to pitch in New York healthy, and I think that's important. He didn't fail the way Sonny Gray failed. He didn't fail the way Joey Gallo failed. Like, it wasn't like oh, this guy showed up and he just can't handle New York. His shoulder was messed up. Like, that's what I chalk it up to. Then looking at, Luis Severino, I'm out on Severino. I think it's mutually beneficial for both parties. He just, whenever you see a guy, make a tweak in their fastball shape and it gets worse, typically that tells you they're compensating for something, and that compensation is typically injury. And if that's what Severino's doing, then that means that he's pitching and he's trying to prevent himself from getting hurt. And when you're pitching to prevent injury, you're not pitching. You're just trying to, you know what I mean? Like, that's not pitching at that point. And I'm not saying that to critique Severino. Like, I get it from his perspective. You want to be on the mound. You want to compete. No one wants to sit on the IL and be on the shelf and say, hey, well, at least I threw 20 good innings. Like, you want to be productive for your team. And I have a lot of respect for him as a competitor. I have a lot of respect for him and what he did with the Yankees. He was one of my favorite Yankees. Quite honestly, I'm going to be honest, he was my favorite Yankee when he was really good, right? Like, that was my guy. But it's kind of where reality is right now. Looking at the two relievers that you mentioned, like you really want to bring back, or at least we're interested in bringing back, in Middleton and Peralta. I think Peralta is kind of a necessity because you need a left-handed reliever, right? Like, you have none. Like, there's nobody, no disrespect to Matt Crook, but I can't pencil him in as your opening day left-handed reliever in high leverage. He hasn't proven that, right? And then, like, who else even in the organization profiles like that? Like, there aren't a lot of lefty pitching prospects in their org, and that makes sense. They're a big sweeper organization, and sweepers aren't a pitch lefties typically throw. I think, like, what's the harm? You're going to get Peralta back on, like, a 2-year, maybe $3 or $4 million a year, kind of like the Canley contract. You're a rich franchise, right? Like, I don't think the Yankees should be spending big money on relievers, but, like, why should the Yankees go into next year without a left-handed reliever because of $6 million? You know what I mean? Like, you're the New York Yankees. That should be nothing to you. So I think Peralta's a must. I liked Middleton. I just don't know if bringing him back is a must. I kind of view it as like a, hey, if he takes nothing, sure. Like, why not, right? Like, why not? But, I think that they have bullpen depth. I think they have the names and some guys in the farm that can help them out. But you can never have too much pitching. I think this year kind of showed, it doesn't matter how many pitchers you walk into spring training with. If things go wrong, you will end the season with very little pitching, or your pitching depth just stretched to the margins. Could you see some prospects? Like, could you see a Will Warren? Could you see a Clayton Beater? Thinking a little bit like kind of, let's getting a little crazy here. Could we see a Drew Thorpe? Let's get a little crazier. Could we see a Chase Hampton? I think Richard Fitz is is ahead of Thorpe on, like, the schedule just because he finished a full season at AA. But they certainly have pitchers that can help them out next year. And I wonder if that'll play a role in their decision-making in terms of getting depth guys. But again, Wandy Peralta, he's the only lefty. You kind of have to, like, I was even looking at the free agent market. There's a lot of, like, question mark guys of, like, this guy's hurt all the time, or this guy hasn't been very good. And then it's like Josh Hader. And, like, if money's an issue, you're going to sign Josh Hader? Like, that's not happening. Some team is giving Josh Hader, like, $90 million. Like, you're not that team that's going to be giving you $90 million. So, overall in free agency, the two guys I think I'm most interested in seeing back are Peralta and Montas. So, I know I've kind of, like, spoiled a little bit with rookie stuff. But, we talked about Austin Wells a little bit. I kind of hinted at some guys that could help this team next year that are still rookies. For the rookie watch in 2024, who are some guys you think will come up? Who are some guys who are already here who you think who retain their rookie status, who will help the team next year? Kind of give us a little bit of a rundown as to what the future of the Yankees could look like in 2024.
I mean, we talked about it earlier. Austin Wells, I could read off those stats again if you want. But no, I'm not going to do that. But he's the obvious pick. He's, he could very well be the opening day catcher next year, the starting catcher for the season. At the very least, he's platooning with probably Jose Trevino. Some rookies I got my eye on. I don't know if he's ready. If two of these guys are ready that I'm really about to spiel about. But I don't know that Thorpe is going to be ready. But he just won minor league pitching prospect of the year. The guy can throw the ball. He's I got his stats somewhere, but I can't really remember them. But his K percentage was up there. He was an absolute innings eater. There was some stat out there, Ryan, that I'm sure you know, where he had like this amount of batters faced or something, like every single game.
It was like 20. I remember tweeting it out like 30. Dude, I love this tweet so much. 20 batters faced in every start except his last one, which he got pulled from because of some discomfort in his non-throwing shoulder. And they were like, hey, who cares? Just shut him down. But yeah, Bulldog, just workhorse.
There you go. He's a workhorse. And between A+ and AA, 139.1 innings pitched, 14 wins and only 2 losses. I know that's not really stats that we use anymore, but when you got 14 wins and 2 losses, that tells you that that's probably a pretty good starting pitcher. 2.52 ERA, 182 strikeouts, 34% K rate. That gets me very, very, very excited. A 0.98 whip. That gets me very, very, very excited. 3.05 FIP. The guy could be, at the very least, a 3-starter on the Yankees at some point. I think he'll be an impact at some point. I don't know if that's this year, but he's on my rookie watch for next year. I think he could come up sometime, mid-July, maybe a September call-up. I know he maybe won't make that much of an impact next year. Second guy I really have my eye on, Ryan, I know you've had your eye on him all season too. Ben Rice, catcher, first baseman. The guy mashes the baseball. I know there are some concerns about his defense. I know a lot are projecting him to just be a first baseman, but in his 2023 season in AA, he batted .327 with a 401 OBP, a 648 slug, and this is still crazy to me, 182 WRC plus. That's insane. I'm so excited about this guy. Ryan, you talked about it earlier. It might be a bit of a boomer tank. The Yankees need a boomer take. The Yankees need to get more lefty. Ben Rice is a lefty. He seems like he mashes the baseball. We'll see if he starts in AAA next year. I think he probably does, given those numbers. And, AAA isn't really somewhere that, good prospects spend a lot of time. Volpe played like 20 games in AAA at the end of 2022, and that was it for him. So he kind of just skipped AAA. But good prospects generally don't spend a lot of time in AAA. If Rice is really the player that he's going to be, and I think he is, I don't think he'll be in AAA come at least, I think, July. I think he could be on the Yankees roster even as soon as, late June, as, I think with the uncertainty of Anthony Rizzo's health, that, he might be a guy that might be at the very least your backup first baseman. But that's what I got for my rookie watch, Ryan. I'm curious what you got for me, because I know you know the Yankees farm system like the back of your hand. So tell me what you got.
First off, I think you had excellent picks. Ben Rice is somebody, like, if he takes if he takes what he did in 2023 and it translates to AAA and Major League Baseball, he's going to be one of the most fun bats to watch come out of the farm. I almost dropped my mic. But, so looking at the pitching side of things, Yoendrys Gomez we got to see for 2 innings this year at the Major League level. I love Yoendrys Gomez. His fastball is kind of unique. It's kind of more of a cut-ride fastball. He actually threw, I think, 1 or 2 fastballs that had cutter movement instead of, like, typical arm side run. Those type of fastballs perform better in terms of quality of contact. They get hit a lot less hard than regular four-seamers. So, he could be a guy who puts up pretty decent quality of contact metrics to go alongside pretty good strikeout numbers. He did struggle with command, but that was as a starter in AA. Could he potentially just be a reliever? He's out of minor league options, so, the Yankees, if they want to have him on the team next year, they're going to have him on the team or DFA him. I think they'll either trade or keep him, so we'll see there. Will Warren's my guy. Will Warren led all of AAA and stuff. Plus, Will Warren has a stupid good sweeper. His changeup and four-seam fastball improved in AAA dramatically, and allowed him to deal with lefties. I think he could be a guy. Honestly, I thought he could be a reliever. I thought he could be a reliever in August, right? Like, I think the only reason he didn't come on the team was because you need to make some 40-man moves, and you have a lot of guys who need to be on the 40-man roster, like Clayton Beater, another guy who could be in the mix here. Just looking at the farm system up and down, a lot of their best talent, I think, is on the pitching side of the ball. I really think this is a deep pitching farm in terms of at least the higher end talent or the upper level talent. You mentioned Drew Thorpe, who quite honestly could be one of the best pitchers on this team next year if he takes another leap. Richard Fitz is a solid pitching prospect. Chase Hampton might be better than Drew Thorpe stuff-wise. We'll see. Like, he might be him too. Like, I know he didn't pitch as well in Double-A, but he's 21 and hit an innings limit last year. Like, it was his first time going over 60 innings pitched, right? And he's got electric stuff. So we'll wait and see on that regard. But I think pitching-wise, the Yankees are going to have a lot of young guys come up. It kind of makes you question how much money they should invest long-term into the rotation. But then again, you're trying to win a World Series, so how much do you want to rely on prospects and rookies? But, you know, you mentioned Austin Wells. You mentioned, we talked about him extensively. I think Austin Wells is right now the most prepared major league prospect they have in terms of just like a guy I trust to just walk into next year and perform. Anthony Volpe he's like right behind him as a close second. Jason Dominguez is kind of a weird, like, what are you going to expect from him coming back from Tommy John? When is he going to come back? In what role? In what capacity? We'll see. But overall, like, I think the prospects, that's kind of you're clinging on to that as hope. You know what I mean? You're clinging on to that as, like, this is a thing that could go right for the Yankees. And if it does, I think they can win a World Series off that. Like, if they get good outcomes from their prospects, I think they'll be very good. The big thing is, though, of course, do they have the veteran talent? Steve Cohen said this, you know, at the deadline. You can't bet on hope. You can't bet on, like, I hope this goes right. So you can't really bet on prospects turning out for you to fix your franchise, but you can put yourself in a position where you have so much good veteran talent and you have such a safe roster that if these prospects pan out, you go from like, hey, you're maybe a wild card team, fringe division contender, has an outside shot at the World Series, to this team's one of the best teams in baseball, right? And that's that next step you want to take. That's that next step that the Braves took. You know, if you think 2018, right, that team got kind of curb stomped by the Dodgers. You know, in 2019, they got the brakes beaten off them by the Cardinals in a Game 5. And then ever since that point in time, 2020, NLCS. 2021, NLCS. 2022, they didn't get to the NLCS, but they won their division and won 100-plus games. And then this year, they won 100-plus games and won their division again. So, you know, you want to get to that point as a franchise. And I think part of that is developing young talent. So, you know, I think we talked about a lot today. I'm actually very excited to see what the comments have to say about this. I'm very excited to see, you know, what you guys say on social media about the season. Look, it wasn't the year we were looking for. It wasn't the year that, you know, any of us expected we would have. But now you can only look forward, right? Jack Curry kind of put this beautifully. It's like, you know, now you're in a position where you need to make sure you never end up in a spot like this again. And sports are cyclical. You will end up in a spot like this again eventually, right? Like, that's just how life goes. Things go wrong and you have to reset. But can you push that down the road a little bit more? You know, like we went through a retool in 2016 and it's 2023 and we're back in that stage, right? Like, how do we avoid making a 7-year cycle? It should look more like a 10 to 15-year cycle, especially when you have a lot of money. So, you know, if you're a Yankee, well, you're a Yankee fan if you're probably watching this, but, you know, if you guys enjoyed today's episode, make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know what you guys think in the comment section. You know, what did we get right? What did you think we got wrong? You know, what are your expectations for next season? Obviously, it's hard to make predictions because free agency hasn't even begun yet. We don't even know who the hitting coach is. Like, there's a lot of stuff we don't know, but we'll figure out over the next coming weeks, and if you want up-to-news information on that, you should check out Fireside Yankees. We've got multiple channels on different various platforms. We've got a Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page. You guys can follow our personal Twitter accounts. Those are above our heads. And you guys can check out Empire Sports Media for all your New York sports content on articles. And with that being said, Aiden, it's been a blast, and we'll see you guys in the next episode of Fireside Yankees. Peace out.